Hi, this is Deboki, and today I'm going to be reviewing Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. I am kind of catching up on all of the books that I've been reading over the past few months. It's been a while since I've done like a monthly wrap-up or really that many reviews at all, so there are quite a few books that I could be talking about, but for the sake of my sanity, I'm just going to focus on the books that I feel like I'm still thinking about in the months since I've read them. And I read Little Fires Everywhere at the end of last year, and it definitely gave me something to think about. But since it's been a few months, I've noticed that my feelings about it have become a little bit less intense. But in some ways, I think that's also indicative of my feelings about the book overall. So Little Fires Everywhere is, of course, Celeste Ng's second book. It came out, I think, last year. It was super highly anticipated, especially coming off of the immense success and well-earned success of Everything I Never Told You. This book follows the Richardson family who live in the very planned and idyllic town of Shaker Heights, Ohio. The book opens with their house on fire, but it's not actually really that concerned with that event. Instead, it flashes back to the arrival of a new person to the town, Mia, who's come to the town with her daughter, Pearl. And Mia and Pearl end up taking up residence in one of the Richardsons' extra house as a tenant. And Mia has quite a few secrets, and she and Pearl have had this very nomadic life, but she promises Pearl that this is going to be their final permanent location. As they settle into the town, Mia and Pearl's lives both become incredibly entwined with the Richardsons. On top of all of this, Shaker Heights becomes shaken when a baby who was abandoned at a local fire station when her destitute Chinese immigrant mother was unable to take care of her gets adopted by a local family, a local white family, but then ends up being kind of reclaimed by her Chinese immigrant mother, who has since gotten a job and is now able to support her daughter. This conflict reaches the two families at the center of this book and sets them at odds with each other, exposing deeper secrets and leading, yes, to a house fire. I read this book for probably the same reason that a lot of people did. I loved Everything I Never Told You. I never actually got around to doing like a full review of it. I talked about it in a monthly wrap-up, but I kind of wish I had done a longer, more in-depth review because that book was just so impactful for me. I read it and it's just like has stuck with me ever since. So yeah, I went into Little Fires Everywhere prepared. I wasn't really sure what I was prepared for, but I was prepared. And I think the book was good, but the only reason it's really stuck with me is because I've also realized how little it has stuck with me, if that makes sense, especially compared to Everything I Never Told You. I know it's a little bit questionable to focus a review so much around comparing a work to an author's previous work, especially when that previous work is a highly acclaimed debut, but I'm gonna do it anyways because I think reading Little Fires Everywhere and comparing it to Everything I Never Told You helped me understand Ng's writing style better and get to some ideas of what I like about it as well as what I don't like about it. What I think Ng is really good at is finding a simple truth and striking that chord really hard. In Little Fires Everywhere, there's a particular passage that describes Mrs. Richardson's relationship with her youngest daughter that I'm just kind of obsessed with. I feel like Ng was really able to capture the way that anxiety and love can be mixed so strongly in the experience of being a mother and a daughter, and how that mixture can become kind of fraught and like create these really like tense bonds whose like the origins of those bonds might be innocent, but they can grow into something really toxic. These passages are complemented by Celeste Ng's distinctive writing style, which feels very interior to the characters. A lot of times I think when I've read books that are told from like a single character's point of view, or like really anytime you get a version of an event that's told from one character's point of view, that point of view character can kind of feel like the one person you understand the least. I think it's kind of like even though you live your life and you know your life better than anyone, the fact that you don't understand how your actions or you yourself come off to other people means that you're also limited in your understanding of yourself. And I think that's something that can happen a lot, like I said, in like books that are told from a particular character's point of view, where they end up sort of feeling like the least understood character of the book. But Ng waves between different characters' point of view in a way that I think really blurs the line between people, but still allows them to be vivid. I love that she has such a distinctive writing style. It's something that she employs really well in Everything I Never Told You, and she uses it again in Little Fires Everywhere. It also helps that Ng is able to paint these really compelling settings. The Shaker Heights setting of Little Fires Everywhere has such a polished exterior that she illustrates through these small details about how the town and the school and the people all work, and I really felt drawn into that world and how it was affecting the families within it. All of these different facets of things that I liked about Little Fires Everywhere are in tune with the experience of what I loved about Everything I Never Told You, where she's detailing this powerful story of a family being torn apart in a highly personal yet universal way across cities and towns that are portrayed with immense care. And so I enjoyed Little Fires Everywhere while I read it. I thought it was an exciting and at times emotional read, and I was really completely drawn in and like really wanted to know everything that was happening while I was reading it. But then I finished and I found myself not necessarily having the same sort of impactful, like soaking in the experience kind of thing. Instead, I was sort of counting all the things that I found frustrating about the book, some of which are actually complicated by the fact that they have their basis in things that I love about Celeste Ng's writing. In my monthly wrap-up where I talked about Everything I Never Told You, I described Ng's writing style as dreamlike. The way she shifts from character to character is disorienting, but in a way that really suited a novel about a family who has been struck the harshest and most disorienting blow you can imagine. I think that her writing style is still distinctive for a book like Little Fires Everywhere, which is tracking different mother-daughter interactions. It allows you to see the different sides of these relationships, but yet also kind of treat them like one constant universal story of motherhood that affects and shapes everyone's lives. But in Little Fires Everywhere, there were also definitely moments where I found this technique to be less effective, particularly when she uses it to tell the story from the point of view really most of the male characters, like the Richardson boys or Mr. Richardson. There's one brief and kind of sort of interesting passage where she's telling the story from the point of view of a lawyer, and he's thinking about like the challenges of raising his daughter in a country where none of the dolls look like her, and it's this passage that feels out of place, but I thought it was at least saved, you know, from the fact that it has this insight added into it. But otherwise, the male characters don't really add much to the story than just like typical tropey boy or man behavior, like moping about being friend zoned. Hearing the story from their perspective didn't really add much to my overall understanding of the narrative, and it actually felt distracting, particularly from the mother-daughter core of the story. Like I said, I think the unfocused style of Ng's narrative really works in a story about grief and family. I think it needs to be pared down a little bit more to work well in a book that is so much more focused on one specific type of relationship. And let's be clear, this book is incredibly heavy-handed when it comes to its questions and themes and ideas about motherhood. At times it feels like these ideas are so dominant that it leaves no surprises about where the story is going to go. Like the plot points happen more in the service of the themes than of the story itself. To explain this, I'm going to refer to some plot points in both Everything I Never Told You and Little Fires Everywhere, but I'm going to just talk kind of like abstractly about it. I'm not going to name any characters or any like specific events or consequences, so they should be not super spoilery. There's a storyline about abortion in Little Fires Everywhere that to me felt really telegraphed early on by the fact that in a book about moms, a story about the unwillingness to be one is like an obvious contrast to everything else that's happening. This parallels my least favorite plotline of Everything I Never Told You, which involves infidelity. I'm realizing now, kind of in part because of Little Fires Everywhere, that the reason I didn't like this infidelity plotline is because it just seems so obvious in a book about family ties. A heavy-handedness that really stands out against that dreamy, like disorienting atmosphere that Ng's writing style creates, which allows subtle actions to have enormous meaning. Of course, it's possible to explore these types of events well in a book. That's why they're so common. Just because something is obvious doesn't make it bad, and not everything has to be subtle to be elegantly written. Infidelity may be an overused part of family narratives, but the saving grace for me was that Ng was using it to explore something that's less commonly explored, which are the interracial struggles of American mixed-race families. Sure, it was heavy-handed, but it was built up and dealt with in a way that connected to other aspects of the story, and that made it feel more interesting and emotional and not just in service to the book's themes itself. But I didn't really feel like she did the same thing with the similarly obvious abortion plotline of Little Fires Everywhere. The build-up and the follow-through on the story was fine, but honestly, I didn't really feel like the execution was that dissimilar to a plot line in a teen soap, where, you know, these huge, obvious events can have a very understated sense of consequence. And while we're on the subject of heavy-handedness, there's a whole thing about Virgin Marys in this book that, like, when I finally realized its connection to one of the characters, I kind of groan. It's like when someone makes a pun that's like kind of clever, but like you kind of hate them for making that pun. That was kind of my feeling in this book. It was just kind of like cute, but cute didn't really suit the book for me. If you're keeping track, my complaints about this book probably seem a little bit contradictory. On the one hand, I wish her narration had been more centered around the women in the book so that it better supported the complicated ideas around mother-daughter relationships being illustrated. On the other hand, I find her exploration of these ideas incredibly heavy-handed. But I think these thoughts are actually related. To me, this felt like a few disparate stories about moms that were assembled and connected to create some kind of overarching narrative that really wanted to make sure that it was about moms. So to do that, it just brought in a few more stories about moms to seal the deal. Some of these stories connected better than others, and I think they would have connected better with a pared down plot and narrative structure. Let me say this again, I think this book is a good book. I think that if you haven't read it, it is worth reading, and I think that if you love it, it is worth loving. Celeste Ng is an amazing writer, and there are going to be characters and passages from this book that will stick with me. I'm still excited for Celeste Ng's next book, and I'm even interested in seeing where the TV series for Little Fires Everywhere goes. But ultimately, this book did make me sort of go back and reevaluate what I love and don't love about Celeste Ng's writing. And that does not mean anything good or bad about her as a writer or me as a reader, and it's obviously something that can change in the future as I read more of her works. I haven't liked anything that J.K. Rowling has written since Harry Potter, and I haven't been able to really get into anything Jacqueline Carey has written that's not her Crucial's Dark trilogy. And those are still like the most beloved series that I've like owned and read and just loved. Everything I Never Told You is still one of the most personally affecting books I've ever read, and even if there's some super dramatic future out there where it ends up becoming the only Celeste Ng book that I love, nothing is really going to ever take away from the feeling that I had when I finished reading it. So thank you for watching. Let me know what you thought of Little Fires Everywhere if you've read it, or if you've had any similar experiences with an author where you really loved one book and then another book kind of made you reevaluate what you loved about them. So yeah, bye.